Hey there, business rock stars. Welcome back to Business Uncomplicated, where we take business topics and make them, well, uncomplicated. I'm your host, Rich Nazzaro, and I'll be joined here in a second by my brilliant co host, Andy Worobel. And today we have a real treat for you. But before we jump into who our guest is, I want to ask you guys some questions. So, first, did you know that consistent brand presentation can increase revenue by 33%? Or that it takes a person 50 milliseconds, that's 0.05 milliseconds, to form an opinion about your website? Or that 70% of consumers make a purchase based on brand name alone. So they don't care about anything else, just the name encourages them to buy from that brand. So that's why we're really thrilled today to welcome Kelly Morgan. So let me tell you why you need to lean in for this one. Kelly is not just a creative director, she's so much more. This woman is a powerhouse. She has done it all. She has worked on the agency side of creative. She has worked on the client side of creative for big brands like Salesforce. And now she's helping companies of all sizes help create a brand. And one that's not just pretty, she absolutely does that, but one that connects with human beings. So here's what's going to blow your mind as you listen to Kelly's story. Kelly is going to share a campaign that she did that helped improve engagement on a website by 75%. Now, that's not just luck. That's strategy meets creativity in its absolute finest. So today we're going to uncover Kelly's secret sauce for turning B2B brands into human connection machines. We'll discover why strategy always comes before pretty colors and fancy logos, how to find that magical human tone of voice that makes customers say, yes, they get me. The Apple phenomenon, why your IT guy secretly cares about branding way more than he'd admit. Kelly's foolproof brand guideline blueprint that keeps everyone consistent, from LinkedIn banners to business cards to websites. The psychology behind why our brains process visuals 60,000 times faster than words, and how to use that superpower in your brand. Plus her bold prediction of why we're all craving more hands-on experience in this AI-crazed world. Kelly shares her philosophy on what she calls filling the well. It's her creative inspiration, how she breaks down the difference between brand strategies and brand refresh, and will give us the inside scoop on how AI is changing the creative game without losing that essential human touch. So, whether you're a startup founder trying to figure out your first logo, or a seasoned executive wondering why the brand feels like it needs a little bit of a refresh, Kelly's got a roadmap to transform your business into something people actually want to connect with. So buckle up, business champions. We're about to make branding fun, strategic, and surprisingly simple. So let's dive in.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, welcome, Kelly. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're excited to have you on Business Uncomplicated to talk about all things design and creative, since I am not. We appreciate what you do. So let's get started and talk about, just like, introduce yourself, give us a little bit about your background, how you got into this space.
Sure. My name is Kelly Morgan. I am located in Denver, Colorado. I am an art director, creative director. I have a pretty rich agency background. I've worked for agencies in Chicago and Boston and Denver. And I've also worked on client side on B2B. Most recently, I spent the last 3.5 years at Salesforce.
Yes, I remember it well. Um, So, I mean, given kind of this breadth of experience that you have, kind of what's the philosophy around kind of what you do and how you achieve kind of the results that you do with clients?
Well, when I'm working with a client, when I'm partnering with a client, my approach is always rooted in like clarity and collaboration. I don't want to know just like what they do. I want to know why they do it and who it is they're trying to talk to, and what they want people to feel. And then I try to take all of that and translate it into their brand experience in a way that feels human and authentic. B2B, especially, those kind of clients tend to get a little bit hung up on like their technical details or like what their widget does. And it's really important to figure out how you can translate that into a language that will speak to their audience. Um, and they, in a way that's a little bit more human and a little bit more storytelling that lands with them in terms of how is this product or service going to help my life and make my job easier.
Kelly, we've had the pleasure of working with you, which is really lucky for us and a great experience. I'm wondering two things. The first one is if we think about branding and building the brand and then putting that into action, I'm wondering where the sweet spot is in your service in terms of branding, campaign building, that sort of thing. And then secondly, I'm wondering just how do you help clients to really find that right brand, that right voice, and that right emotion
Yeah.
to connect the humans, particularly in a B2B environment.
Um, I think it all starts with strategy. Strategy is the most important thing, and the agreement on what we're trying to say, who we're trying to talk to, what we want them to think or feel after seeing our message. And once that's lined up and everybody's agreed on that, I've heard it said this way, say it straight, that's the strategy, and then say it great. And say it great is the creative part of it. And that's what I do. I translate that into visuals and messaging.
So you start with the strategy, then where do you get on to the campaign? Like, how does that transition work from I have this amazing product and I want everyone to know about my product. How do you get from that strategy to that intuitive, like, okay, great, let's talk to our customers now?
Yeah. It's I think you have to figure out a human tone of voice. I think you also need to know where your customers' watering holes are, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not only like who are we talking to and what do we want trying to say, but it's also like where do those people hang out? Is it like are we targeting a HR expert that's like on LinkedIn, you know, day in and day out, or are we looking to maybe a younger audience that's more engaged with social and we need to put together a social campaign that'll reach them? So it's about knowing the right place to reach the right audience at the right time with the right message.
Yeah. I like the human aspect. I think that I was just doing a presentation for a client, and one of the things, it was about AI, and one of the things that they had called out is this idea that when they implemented this bot, that the um, customers kind of revolted. Like they didn't want to talk to a bot, they want a person.
Yeah.
And PwC did this survey that 59% of customers they surveyed feel like this human element is being lost,
Yeah.
right? So we're kind of jumping into this AI world, but in a really cold manner.
Yeah.
And so what I like about what you're saying is when you're thinking about a brand and you're thinking about attracting people to that brand, it's about connecting, right?
Absolutely. I think it's about connecting. I think it's about what we want people to feel and how do we say something so that they don't feel sold to, they feel more seen, and that it actually connects with them on a human level. Because like whether it's B2B or B2C, like humans still buy from humans and humans still interact with humans. And I think AI is a game changer for sure. Um, but I don't think it's going to replace the human element of that human layer on top, where you have the emotion and the humor and the cultural nuance. I don't think an algorithm can fake that.
Right. I think it can try.
I can try.
Listen, it's making advancements. Who knows? And
Yeah.
It's clever, but yeah, does it hit that right chord where you're just like, I know exactly what you
right.
mean, or
Yeah.
oh, that one really got me.
Yeah.
Um, tell
Well, that's
me,
it. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, tell us about, either a campaign that you've worked on or one that you've seen that you think got it perfectly. Like, give us an example of that, and then why do you call that one out?
One campaign that I worked on that I'm particularly proud of is Farm Lore. It is a community here in Colorado. And it started as a completely blank slate. There was no name, no identity, no materials, no nothing. And we came to Farm Lore, the name, out of the idea of like honoring the land and the narrative tied to it, both past and present. And then we put together all of the visuals, the identity, the logo, the color palette, the typography, the tone of voice, and created this campaign. And it really did resonate with people, which is why I'm proud of it. The out of home billboards that we put together drove engagement 75% to the website, which is pretty
Wow.
high, pretty high.
Yeah, it's huge.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I love that one because it's like from the very, very beginning, but that's really a luxury. Because I feel like a lot of times, having done a lot of time in marketing, we come to it and we're like, okay, here's our brand. We know what guidelines we need to work in. Here's my campaign. Tell us a little bit about the process that you see that works in terms of just really the step by step of how do I get things done?
It is a luxury to do a brand from the very beginning. And that's where you get to do all the collaboration and the exploring and the back and
Mm-hmm.
forth. And then once you've kind of like landed in a good place, you put together the brand guidelines, like you mentioned, so that
Right,
you can
right.
give people guardrails.
Do's
The
and
other way,
don'ts.
yep. The other thing is that you may come into an established brand that already has all of that. And it's more about figuring out, what is the message that we want to get out for this particular campaign, for this particular audience, and what's the best way to do that. And that's actually a lot of fun too. And you'll see brands evolve over time. So even if you got to um, create the logo originally, it's probably going to evolve over time.
When you started talking about strategy, and we love strategy, I think it's something that people don't pay enough attention to. And so, what happens when the strategy isn't baked? And to Andy's question, you come in the middle of this brand, and you're like, okay, what do I do with this? Because they're maybe not sure what to do with it.
Right.
How does that iteration happen with the strategy to kind of the messaging to the humanization of their brand when maybe they're not connected to it,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
strategy. Yeah.
I think that's when you have to roll up your sleeves and ask the really tough questions of,
Right.
what is it that makes you guys different? What is it that you offer? And what is that nugget? I've definitely gotten creative briefs where I'm like, I'm not really sure what this is saying. And so then you do have to kind of dig in and figure out if there is that like simple human truth that you can get to. Um, and you may have to play around with it. Maybe it's something that's what would, if this brand were a car, this brand were a tweet, or this brand were a person, how would it show up? What clothes would they wear? What kind of hair would they have? Like, how do we bring this to life?
Yeah.
But it's really, really hard to do. I think strategy is one of the toughest jobs out there. I've tried doing it for myself, so I know, and you guys have as
It's
Yeah.
well.
always harder for yourself. It's
Uh,
amazing.
uh,
We say this all the time. We tell our clients to do one thing and then we're like, "Oh yeah, we need to do that for ourselves too." It
Yeah.
is the cobbler's children, for sure.
Yeah.
right. And I think that I think most companies say they have a strategy, but I don't know if it's really a strategy. And to me, a strategy is something that's documented, written down,
Yes.
understood, not just by the leadership, but everybody in the company. And I would assume that, as you're creating a brand or a creative, I mean, it's not only representing the company, but it's going out to attract
Right.
customers, right? So if you can't figure it out, then how are you going to translate it for somebody to be like, oh, I get what this company is?
Right, right. And
If
that's
I
where I think it
think
goes back to collaboration. Everybody agrees and clarity. We're all clear that this is what we're trying to say.
And when you're collaborating, I mean, obviously it depends on the side of the company. So you started by saying you were in agency. Obviously you were in internal at Salesforce. And then of course, I know you've done work with small and medium-sized business as well. So you kind of have seen it from one side of the spectrum to the other, which is an interesting place to be for anybody in their career, right? Kind of pivoting around and kind of seeing the same problems from different angles. Um, when you think about the strategy from those different perspectives, is there something that stood out to you in terms of like people do it better when they understand their audience? People have a better strategy when their product is simple. People like, is there something around that is a secret sauce that people would say, oh, like if I just did this, my strategy would be dialed in?
I think that's a great question. I think a good example of a company that has done that is Apple. Like if you look at their like clear, crisp design, when you're unpackaging something, the way that it's packaged, you're like, oh my God, someone really considered me and thought about me as they were doing this. And so I think they've always had that clarity of who they are and who they're talking to. Um, but they also like have the goods to back it up, right? Because they deliver on the tech and they deliver on the experience. Because, marketing can be really powerful, but if the product or the service isn't any good, no one's going to come back another time around. So I think it's just that when you have almost like a visceral reaction to it, which I mean, most people I know have an iPhone.
Right. Right. Or a Mac or whatever. And
Yes.
and it and to your point, it's the seamless integration of those things. And I know that when I set up my new iPhone, it's connected to my computer and I can iMessage from my computer or my iPhone and it's there. And yeah.
Yeah. And you're also kind of part of that tribe, right? You're like, oh yeah, I'm part of that. I do that too.
Yeah.
Kelly, I'm curious because I think as we're talking, you're right. It's that emotional response that you get to a brand, but we're talking about, consumer things, things that I do. When I'm working for a company, particularly in the B2B environment, not everybody cares about the brand. If I'm in IT or if I'm in finance, I'm like, necessary evil. How can we make it as less expensive as possible? All that sort of thing. But I think that there's some power again to that emotional connection. So I'm wondering if you have advice or counsel for people who maybe are not part of the marketing team for what is it that a strong brand buys you that is outside of the sales and marketing department?
Yeah, I think it's pretty I would think it's pretty normal for someone in IT or, some to think like that branding doesn't affect them. Um, but it absolutely does because branding is the story that you tell about the company and it is goes all the way, it's the through line all the way through. And I think that that IT person may have an Apple phone in their pocket because they have that same emotional, visceral reaction, and they may be able to tell you all the tech reasons why, but there is that emotional component to it always as well.
I love that. Yeah, the story that you tell because we all have different pieces of that story, right? But it's the consistency that makes it really strong.
Yes.
Well, and what I like about that also is that when you think about a brand, right? And I like the Apple example you use because it's, somebody thought through the packaging, somebody thought through the design or the usability of something. Um, Whether you're in sales or marketing, usually, at least on the success side and the customer success side, you get the complaints and the support side. It's really this circular event that product needs to understand what the customer feels. right? The customer is voicing opinions about the product normally. The success team and the support team are usually fielding that, like, both sides of this equation. And to
Pleasure
your
and
point,
pain, right?
right. And your point is I, as a consumer, are going to say, you offered me this. Your brand stands for this. And that's not what I'm getting.
Right.
And so I like that answer, because you should care, because you're on one side of this equation, right? Whether you're responsible for the brand and pushing the brand out, or sales bringing the customers in, you're ultimately representing this brand
Right.
and like that through line.
And that's where you want all the touch points to be um, similar, right? Like the way that I've explained it in the past is that, like your LinkedIn, banner doesn't have to look exactly like, your placed ads, but they need to be similar enough that someone recognizes that they're in the right place, like siblings in a family, So if you
Yeah.
are on a landing page and then you click through, you want to know visually that you've landed in the right place.
Right.
So there needs to be that through line, and that through line builds trust,
Right.
because when you don't have it, that can break down.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I know when we went through our process, like, never even occurred to me that, like, banner on LinkedIn versus what goes on the website versus what goes on the TikTok page, or what goes, like, literally, I guess intelligently I knew that it should look the same, but I never thought about the colors, the placement of things, right? Because it's just never been, I'm not a creative person by nature. I'll blame that. But, like, it's never been a thought around how that happens. But but I've experienced it, right?
Yeah.
Nike or Apple or these big brands that
Yeah.
really have kind of nailed it. You attach to it, but you never think, as a business, what goes into that brand messaging and how in depth or detailed it is.
Yeah.
So
And
for those of people who don't, like, how would they think about starting that? Like, where?
well, I think it goes back to brand guidelines,
Yeah.
whether they're established or not, brand guidelines should give you that through line so that
So
you
for people who
know.
don't know what a brand guideline
Oh,
is,
yes.
what is
Thank
that?
you.
Right?
So brand guidelines are like your instructions for the brand.
Okay.
So you know that you are using this logo and this font and this is your color palette, and this is, the way that images are treated. And then, really good ones will show you, like, this is how then this brand all comes together, and this is how it shows up on social, and this is how it shows up, in digital, and this is how it shows up on the web, and this is how, in all of the different places that you might see it. And then and so having that as your guardrails, knowing so that you're not like starting over every time or confusing your audience is key. And then it's, if it's a smaller company, I also kind of recommend that they have someone that's a brand ambassador that's kind of like really knows the guidelines and is like, okay, no, this is how we show up. Because it can be interpreted differently.
Right. Like, because I could imagine you do all this work, you create this brand guideline, and then, like, a doofus like me is going to go, oh, I just got to cut this picture from the web and throw it on and use that. And you're like,
Right.
no, absolutely,
No.
like, completely violating the brand guideline.
Right.
Um, and so, how often, when you go into a customer, do they have brand guidelines? Is it a common practice, or is it usually?
It just depends. It just depends on the customer. I would, if they're a smaller company, it might be something that I help them establish. If they're a well-established company, it might be something that you can, help them refresh. Like a really, a really good brand is always kind of evolving, right? And so it's not like, and it's not even something that I think maybe their audience even notices. Like Nike has had the swoosh for ever, right? But they do a
Right.
really nice job of always kind of iterating and making taking that same symbol and bringing it up to date. So when you're redoing a brand, it doesn't have to be like throwing everything away and starting over. It can be a simple refresh. But yeah.
What are the bare minimum? So if you're going into and advising, a CIO or a CMO, like what are the things that you think every company, regardless of size, need to have? Is it the brand guidelines? Is it the logo? Are there additional elements that you see really tie it all together that people forget about?
I think the brand voice is equally important. The way
Yeah.
that the way you're speaking about yourself, the way that you're getting your message out there, that should definitely, and you might speak to different audiences a little bit differently depending, but I think that's something that's also really important is to have some consistency and through line and how the messaging comes out, as well as the visuals and having established brand guidelines and then I think too, you can depending on how big the company is and depending what they have going on, you can have different campaigns that still live and breathe within the broader brand guidelines.
So that naturally leads us to the question of AI. When we talk about voice, my new best friend is ChatGPT that makes me sound so much more intelligent.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But now we see a lot of copy that we're like, okay, clearly that
It's
is ChatGPT.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. What do you see working and what do you see not working with the use of AI?
I think AI is, I think it's a game changer. I've heard it compared to, when people went from letterpress to the computer. That was like
Mm,
a huge evolution. I
sea
think
change.
this is going to be, yep, this is going to be that as well. I mean, as far as like for creatives, I think it helps you to iterate faster, come up with ideas quicker, maybe get some stuff done at a better or faster clip. But I still think it's up to the creative to be the curator, right? Like just because ChatGPT or some other AI system serves something up doesn't mean that it's the right solution.
So I want to take a step back and ask you, how'd you get into this field? So I'm not creative.
Um,
I always admire people who can draw or take a color palette and the color palette you put together for us, I would have never imagined, right? So did you start with like an artistic background and you kind of like leaned in this direction, or where did this passion come from?
I think that I've just always loved visual stuff,
Mhm.
photography, illustration, design, how it all comes together, and how those things create meaning.
Yeah.
I've read the fact that like the human brain processes a visual like 60,000 times faster than, the written word. So it's just like that, that visceral reaction, that human reaction to seeing something that's beautiful or not beautiful, and how compelling it is or isn't. And so I knew that that was the area I wanted to go into. And then I think I've always also been a little bit interested in like what makes people tick, like the psychology behind it.
Yeah.
Like why are people the way they are? So then there's that intersection of trying to identify what your audience needs, trying to give them something in a visual way so that it becomes meaningful communication.
So then where do you get your like what inspires you? So when you're on a brand or you're asked to do a project and maybe it's dry, maybe you're like, "Oh, I've built a brand for I don't know, like something like a widget." And you're like, "Well,
Yeah,
this widget isn't really interesting."
yeah,
But like how do you inspire yourself to inspire others? Because that's really what you're doing, right? Is you're building this emotional connection and this brand and you're doing it through visual and color and all that. So how do you inspire yourself to inspire others?
yeah. That's a great question. Like I think tucked in the back of my mind, I think I always have things that I remembered, whether it's something funny that my kid has said or, the way that I call it filling the well, right?
Nice.
So whether it's through walking through a museum and noticing a sign that has different graphic colors, those are things that you kind of tuck away. And then, when you're working with a client, you need to really deeply understand what they do and then try and figure out a funny way and or maybe it's really empathetic or some way for them to come across in the world that is different from their competition that stands out. one of the things I really love is those opening sequences to TV shows.
Uh-huh.
Like the way that they set up like the way they set the table, and it's
Exactly.
everything is done with so much purpose. The sound, the font, the colors, are there like the intro to the White Lotus is just so
Right,
beautiful.
right, right. Yeah,
Just watching the Great British Baking Show too, and it's too. You hear the violins, you see the tent and the beautiful greenery. It's your time to like, oh, let's sit down and do this. It's just such a nice entree.
Yeah,
right.
it's setting the stage.
It
Yeah. Well,
is.
I
It's
mean,
beautiful.
to
Yeah.
this day, for us, who grew up in 80s and 90s, you hear I'll be there for you. And you think of like the your favorite episode of Friends, right?
Right.
Like it just like you know what that means, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so it just it invokes that emotion, so to
Yeah.
speak, that
Kelly,
memory.
I'm curious, talking about, filling the well, what are you most excited about now? Like what sort of trends are you seeing that you think are really just fun and interesting right now?
I think AI of course is an interesting one, but I think that there might be a little bit of digital fatigue, and I think that people are going back to something that feels a little bit more hands-on. Like I'm seeing records and records players coming back, right? Or film cameras. So I do think that people want those actual experiences. And, if you can figure out a way to use those in some sort of event, that's always a cool way to help get your brand across. But I don't think everything has to be digital all the time. I think people crave stuff that is a little bit more human.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Particularly
like
as here we are, all looking at a computer screen in
right.
order to see the humans who I really, really like. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's refreshing.
Do you like because we all are seeing those now on LinkedIn or TikTok or wherever is the AI generated images or videos, right? They're like, oh, take a picture and it creates an AI image.
Yeah.
So that stuff you feel like it's going to continue, it's going to be there, but you feel like maybe like somebody would like to see a retro campaign where like, you have a record player in the background and somebody's like the black and white grainy, that's how I think about when I think
Yeah.
retro and a record
Yeah,
player.
yeah. I mean, I think augmented experiences, and I think that people it's about finding the way that they all work together, right?
Yeah,
And figuring out what is the right channel and how to reach people with that channel. And I don't think, it has to be necessarily AI. I think it can
yeah,
be a little bit grittier. Yes.
right. Yeah, yeah. So for people who are listening and struggling maybe with their brand or need a refresh, like what is the kind of practical advice that you give them for where do they start besides calling you, of course? Where do they start thinking about either, we can start with starting a brand or refreshing a brand.
Yeah. Um, well, I think I would say don't skip the strategy because I think you need to be clear, super, super clear on what you're saying, why you're saying it, who you're saying it to, and make sure that everybody's on the same page with that. It's really tempting maybe just to jump into colors and logos and things like that because it's fun, but most of that stuff has a lot of intention behind it.
Yeah,
Um, I think and for a smaller company, I think it's a really like put a stake in the ground, no be and not have decision by committee because I think that when the strategy isn't clear and we've got a whole bunch of people involved, I think things get mucky really fast. So I think it's really important to have a point of view, and people will remember that.
right.
Um, and then, for bigger brands, I think just speak to your audience in a way that feels consistent. Make sure you're doing the same thing at every touch point from your website to your packaging, and leave room to evolve because I think brands are kind of living, breathing things, and that
Yeah,
it's always okay for them to evolve.
yeah, yeah. Oh, we've been living that for the last 2 years. So, but I mean, it's
Maybe you
true.
don't want to evolve as fast or
I
fail fast. I mean, you can look at both sides of that coin. Yeah.
right. I think that I think the thing is, as somebody who's, if you started a business or you're growing a business, I think there are always those 10 balls in the air you're trying to juggle, right? And I think for people who aren't necessarily think of creative, right? So putting all those pieces together that you talked about, um, I think sometimes that struggle is something that is affecting their brand that they don't even know is affecting their brand.
For sure. I mean, you said it yourself. You were like, it didn't even occur to me that all the different touch points should have a consistent look and feel
Right.
because people are, sometimes they're more worried about their messaging or, and it's important to have that whole package. And that's what I love to do.
Yeah. Well, you do very well.
You do. You do.
Um,
Kelly, where can people find you? LinkedIn.
Yep.
What are the right coordinates?
So for me, LinkedIn, I'm Kelly N like North Morgan. You can find me there. And then my website is Kansei Creative. I'll spell it for you. It's
Perfect.
KANSIE creative.com.
KANSIE. Perfect. Perfect. I love it. I love it. Excellent.
well, we thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
been lovely to chat with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think people will take a lot away from it. I think it's really something that is important, which we've learned over the time. And I think people need to think through it in a holistic way about how they want to present themselves and their brand. You know,
Perfect.
Absolutely.
great.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kelly.
guys.
Figure out how to stop this. Okay.